It is such a disruptive process. You're tearing down walls, you're exposing beams, and then you're preparing those beams. You can't just do that in a day. You can't do that overnight. You can't do that with a stealth team of ninjas. You can't do it.
Wouldn't need a whole lot more than 3 weeks. It'd probably take us 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, maybe even do something like that. You'd have to have at least 100 guys or so or more to get in there and get something like that ready.
The truthers feel they don't need to provide an answer for how the explosives were planted.
This is a very different kind of operation. A real investigation would provide some of these answers if we had subpoena power, which the 9/11 Commission did not have.
With the building ready, the demolition team prepares the various explosives on site. To cut steel beams, demolition teams use a shape charge.
This actually is a piece of copper that is part of a shape charge weapon. And what happens is you put a little explosive in each one of these little pockets and you set off the charge, and this whole rim implodes and you get a stream of liquid copper, and this jet of copper will cut through steel.
No matter what the exact shape of the charge, they all will react the same, cutting steel when detonated. Now, personnel clear, and the demolition team places copper-shaped charges on all 24 support columns.
Now, this is a linear shape charge, and it's wired in with the dynamite. When it cuts, it'll cut this column right on this angle, and then this piece will be deflected and displaced in that direction. You have to do the math, but it's 400 grains to a foot, 7,000 grains to make a pound. So it's not really that much, but it's potent stuff. I mean, it'll just blow the snot out of that concrete.
After double-checking their explosives, the demolition team touches off the fuse. Buried in this pile of debris should be hard evidence pointing to implosion. Evidence that should have been found in the rubble of the World Trade Center. The search begins.
Here's a piece right here, that blew away. Here's a whole rat's nest that's still tied into the building. You can't remove all of this stuff.
Richard Gage disagrees with Blanchard's conclusion.
It's a different kind of detonation. They would not leave detonator cords and devices as they do in traditional, more economical detonations. This is a very different kind of operation.
There's a lot of circumstantial claims, a lot of innuendo, a lot of whack-a-mole, which you explain one thing away and they mention something else, and it never ends. But the reality is, this far out, no one has been able to provide a single piece of evidence that those buildings were explosively demolished.
The truthers believe there may be an ulterior reason for the demolition experts' skepticism.
The firms that do controlled demolition of high-rises work for the most wealthy people in our federal government. They cannot possibly support the controlled demolition theory and maintain their clientele.
Projecting the manpower and time needed to place explosives in the 110-story towers exposes a major defect in the controlled demolition theory. The elevator upgrade referred to by truthers might have provided access to the core columns, but a large demolition team would still have needed to work in secret to break through the gypsum board walls and to cut through each column with an acetylene torch. The lack of any demolition evidence in the debris pile at Ground Zero also undermines this theory. But truthers believe the evidence, or lack of evidence, from our experiment points to the real source of the demolition.
Brent Blanchard also talks about that there's no detonator cord down in the debris piles. Well, we're talking about a very high-tech nanothermite, and its detonation mechanism is not even known by Brent Blanchard, much less us.
The technology that was used to bring down the World Trade Center high-rises was very sophisticated. High-tech nanothermite is beyond the technology used by those performing classic controlled demolitions in that industry. They don't know about it. They told us they don't know much about it.
Again, our tests don't change the conclusions made by either side.
Molten metal exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit was discovered in the rubble of Ground Zero, underneath the Twin Towers and Building 7. Even with heavy rain on September 14th and 21st, a constant stream of fire retardants and water, described as creating a giant lake, these fires would not be extinguished until December 13th, 2001, making it the longest burning structural fire in history.
If thermite was the key to the conspiracy, then we need to observe how thermite burns and destroys as well. And in the New Mexico desert, that demonstration is about to begin. There are many questions surrounding 9/11 that have provoked conspiracy theories. The sudden collapse of the Twin Towers has perhaps been the most controversial. Although a search of the remaining beams and columns from the Twin Towers have found no evidence of an explosive reaction, some truthers are adamant that the towers were brought down by a controlled demolition, and these explosions were observed by eyewitnesses.
One eyewitness was standing among a crowd of people on Church Street, 2.5 blocks from the South Tower, when he saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed.
Professional demolition teams use a shape charge made from a C4 explosive to cut steel and send buildings crashing into their own footprint.
So this is a commercial product, so basically you just apply it. Wherever you put a dent, it's going to start firing. It's going to fire molten metal directly into the column and go right through it like it wasn't there.
An explosion sends a stream of molten copper cutting through the steel. But the real evidence of any demolition job is in the aftermath. Columns in the World Trade Center debris did not have the distinctive cut of a shape charge with its permanent copper residue.
I don't see any pictures where I see columns that have been cut like this. I see columns that are broken, I see columns that are cut with a torch. I don't see anything like this in any of the pictures I've seen.
Charred detonators and other telltale signs were also absent in the World Trade Center cleanup. But truthers believe dust residue New Yorkers sampled from across Lower Manhattan after the attacks point to the real instigator of the collapse.
What I found last year was in the dust these chips that were red on one side and gray on the other side. And I had access to a scanning electron microscope, and sure enough, there was in the red side iron and oxygen, implying an iron oxide, and aluminum, the ingredients for thermite. Then we look in the literature and compare. And sure enough, the fellows at Livermore National Lab, I'm not saying they're implicated here by any means, but they describe a material that has all these elements. It's a very high-tech form of thermite called superthermite.